The next exercise is going to be reaction to another dog. If your dog is a little wild at this point, then make sure you stay far enough away. We want our dogs to be successful. So I was just explaining a moment ago about levels. So who has never played a video game in their life? All right, so if we understand the concept of video games, you go from level 1 to level 20, right? You skip all the center 18. That's what we do, right? You go through every stage. So that's the same with our dog. Think about environments for your dog like different levels. If you start training your dog in a completely empty room, 0 distractions, that's level 1. You go in the backyard, level 2. This right here is like level 8, 9, 10. This is difficult because what do we have? We have competing motivating factors. We have animals over there. We have other dogs. We have people talking, me running my mouth. So this makes it much more difficult. So we have to be patient with our dogs and take our time with the events that I talked about. So what I want you guys to do now is I want you to line up one group on this side, the other group on that side, and make sure you're across from another dog because that's going to be the person you're going to work with. Oh, and also you guys probably already know this, but you don't have to make any physical contact. So because of COVID, they started doing handshaking from 12 inches apart, and they're just going to keep that. So that is the new rules now. So when you go to greet, the way that I do it with the other dog is I have the dog on the outside. Let's make it easy for the dogs. So if I was coming up, what's her name? Ann. So if I'm coming up to Ann, I'm gonna have my dog here, and depending on our proficiency level is going to depend on how close we get. So if we're really good, we're gonna do this 12 inches apart. If we're still early, hey, we're gonna do this, depending on where your dog is in the process. So adjust accordingly. If it's too difficult, go back a level. You advance too quickly. Okay, now often people want to rush this. Take your time as you're moving forward. If your dog leaves the heel position, bring them back. So the way that I like to do it, when the dog goes ahead of me, I will say wrong, and I will bring the dog back to the heel position. Remember, your number one focus is your dog, and we want our dogs to be successful. So what happens if you guys start walking towards each other, your dog goes ahead and pulls? You're rewarding the pulling, right? So don't allow your dog to make any forward progress if they're pulling on the leash. Let's take our time. Any questions before we start? All right, whenever you're ready, go ahead and start walking towards the person on the opposite side. Again, take your time. Lure with food if you have to. Praise your dog. Once you get next to each other, have your dog sit. Good, take your time, have your dog sit. Lift up on the leash. And also try not to walk with constant tension. If the leash is tight the whole way, you're doing your dog's homework. And so what we're doing right now is we're using negative reinforcement. We turn pressure on. When she complies, we turn it off. So for you guys at home, what I would do with the pressure, if anybody's having a hard time with your pressure, your dog's not complying right away. So right now we're waiting on the husky. When you get home, teach your dog how to respond to the pressure. All right, so think about this, everyone. Whatever comes first is what your dog is learning. So if I want this dog to learn how to respond to leash pressure, I apply the pressure first. So if I want her to sit, I'm gonna lift up, then I'm gonna take the food and I'm gonna lift up with the food. If she follows it, once she sits, I turn off the pressure and I reward. So by applying the pressure first, I'm teaching her how to respond to the pressure. So again, pressure, now I lure. The lure has to come second, not at the same time. Right here. All dogs have ADD, boom. And then we turn it off and we reward them. Now at home with less distractions, it'll be easier. But notice I'm applying the pressure first, not at the same time. Then I can help. Also, I can even touch the butt. Turn off the pressure, reward. So that's how we start teaching the dog how to respond to the pressure. I also do that with the down. So I'll get down at the dog's level, I'll apply pressure downwards, I'll lure the dog, release the pressure and reward. So I'm teaching them how to respond when I turn on that tension. So think about it this way. Remember, with negative reinforcement, 2 things must take place in order for it to work. Number 1, once the pressure is turned on, it cannot be turned off until the dog complies. And number 2, the moment the dog complies, it instantly has to be turned off. Now, because of that, if I take a brand new dog and I turn on leash pressure, I'm putting that dog in a problem situation. I'm saying, here's a problem, buddy. Do you know the solution? And if we don't give them the solution, they will cycle through different options. They'll go, do you want me to resist? Do you want me to bite the leash? Do you want me to flop on the ground? What do you want me to do? So instead of waiting for the dog to figure it out, we turn the pressure on and then we give them the answer. We give them the solution to the problem. So then when we go to lift up on the leash, before there's any pressure, the dog instantly sits. So if your dog understands leash pressure, you should be able to guide them in any position with 2 fingers on the leash and not even having to apply pressure. Because if I go to lift up on the leash and the dog knows that that's gonna make them sit, before there's any tension, the dog will sit. Now, who here has a bad back? I do. I don't like bending over when I'm teaching a dog a down. Ugh, it hurts, right? Once I know I can lure the dog into the down, then what I like to do is I like to teach the dog, I step on the leash. But this is the important thing, I don't force the dog down. It's a leash cue, not a leash force. So what I do is I lift my leg up very slow. I want the dog to see that. Then I apply, you have to have good balance. So if you don't, hold on to something. I apply a little bit of pressure on the leash, then I lure, then I turn off the pressure. After doing that for about a day, I lift up my leg, dog lays down. I don't have to bend down anymore. So then when I'm teaching the command, I go down, free, reward, down. Now I save my back and I don't have a sore back. So that is something I highly recommend. And again, we're using negative reinforcement, but we're paying the dog. This is what Bethany calls the yeah, you have to. Because reward-based training is what? It's limited by how much the dog wants this. If the dog doesn't want this, we have to make them. So I call leash pressure, Bethany says, yeah, you have to, which I love. I call leash pressure mandatory. So this is how we start to teach our dog that commands are mandatory. And that will help you guys quite a bit. So I highly recommend teaching leash pressure at home. If you need a reminder, just go on YouTube. So some of you might already know me. I have a YouTube channel. If you go on YouTube and you type Nate leash pressure, a video will come up where I'm demonstrating with a puppy. But I highly recommend it. It'll make your training so much easier and it'll save your back. And then keep in mind separating our physicals from our verbals. And it's not natural. So I'm 39 years old. For 39 years, I've been practicing talking with my hands. And now I have to separate my physical from my verbal. Like no one does this. You guys want to go to the movies? No, we go, hey, you guys want to go to the movies? So now you have to do something that is so incredibly unnatural and it's very, very difficult. If you want your dog to learn very, very quickly, you want to be able to separate that. Now, what I highly recommend, we all have smartphones. Who doesn't have a smartphone? Beautiful. Order yourself a little tripod if you don't have one. They cost like 15 bucks on Amazon. It'll be here by this evening. Set it up, hook it up, and film yourself while you train, and then review the footage. You're gonna notice all the mistakes you make. And then think about those events that I talked about. When we think about events, we can slow down. Even if I'm doing a command from a distance, for example, let's say I want that dog to sit from a distance. Often we tell our dogs a command from a distance, and what do? They run to us and they sit, because that's where they learned it. They're not generalized. So if I want to teach a dog a command from a distance, if I say sit to his Doberman and I step forward, I have now entered what event? The reinforcement event. And that event is not over until that dog sits. And this is how I would do it. If I was training him, I would go, sit. Then I walk towards him. And if I have to, I'd lure him into the sit. Yes, reward. After enough of those, I say sit and I take a step. He goes, oh, I know what you're doing. And he pops up into the sit. So always keep in mind that that 1 second doesn't imply, like we're not training goldfish. We're training dogs. They have a good memory. Has anybody ever seen a dog where somebody rings the doorbell and they go, bark, bark, bark. What was I doing? I forget. No, they can put together a very long sequence. So keep that in mind. When you give a command, enter the event that gets the dog to do the behavior. Once they do the behavior, reward them for it. Now, of course, who wants to always have to reward their dog for every single command ever? No one, right? When you start off, this is another analogy that I learned from Bethany. Love Bethany, she's amazing. When you start off, you're a vending machine. Every dollar your dog puts in guarantees a reward. But we have to transition to a slot machine, where every dollar your dog puts in doesn't guarantee a reward, but there's the hope, there's the desire, that possibility they might get a reward. So for me, and this, who often finds dog treats in their washing machine? You should, right? Every time I take my dogs out, I always take a couple treats because I always want them to know that I will possibly pay them at any given random point. I don't want to be a tyrant for my dog. I don't want them to do things just because I'm forcing them. So I like to use what I call my 3-stage process to removing rewards. I'm going to teach that to you guys really quick. Number 1 is stage 1. When we're on stage 1, we're doing what's known as continual reinforcement. We're rewarding every single correct repetition. We move to stage 2 once once the dog starts to do the behavior on the command alone. So you go down and your dog lays down before you have to help them out. Once your dog does that, I go to stage 2. During stage 2, when the dog does the behavior correctly, I do one of two things. I either mark and reward the way I was previously, or I provide verbal praise. So I might go down, yes, reward, or I might go down, good boy, nice job. If we go from continual reinforcement to nothing, it confuses the dogs. If you reward every rep and then you tell your dog down, your dog lays down and you say nothing, your dog's like, did I do something wrong? Do you want me to come to you? What's going on here? So we want to provide feedback. I'll do that for about 2 weeks. Then I move to stage 3. Stage 3, I do one of 3 things. I mark and reward, I provide verbal praise, or I say nothing at all, and I slowly fade out the other 2. So eventually we can do multiple behaviors and reward our dog at the very end. Does that make sense? Okay, I want to do another one of these where we walk by, since I just talked about leash pressure, and then we're going to do one more exercise, and that's going to be the time for the day. All right, so let's get one more rep in of this. Whenever you guys are ready, go ahead and walk towards your partner across the way. And again, don't walk forward if your dog is pulling on the leash. And if you want to just walk by, you could do that too. Work where you are with your dog in the training process. And if you're ready, go ahead and do another one. If you want to lure your dog the entire way, lure your dog the whole way. Like, I'd reward that. That's beautiful. That looks great. That's excellent. Turn out the pressure. Thanks again.